I just got engaged to a man that just spent 13 years in prison, and he's been out for 5 months. So this is his first Valentine's Day since he was 19. He just moved into my house, and I just have to brag, I have never got flowers from a man before, but here I am. I put notes in his lunchbox every single morning, and so I have been sticking those in this box already, but that's the type of thing we're gonna keep in here. I can't show these on TikTok, but there's 2 Polaroids, and I'm sure you can guess. We're gonna do our very first conversation starter, and it is, what is your favorite song? I think today I'm gonna have to say Decode by Paramore.
This is a hard one. My favorite song would have to be by Drowning Pool, Let the Bodies Hit the Floor. That's what I would have to pick for this moment.
So, something came across my feed the other morning and I was stunned by what I was hearing. And at first it seemed pretty innocuous, like a pretty innocuous video of just a couple explaining their relationship to their fan base. However, reading the title text of the video, it explains the story of a woman who is called Phoenix, and she is engaged to marry a man that just spent 13 years in prison. Now, a title like that is sure to grab anybody's attention, right? People first think, 13 years? What on earth did he do? Let me introduce you to the newly engaged couple, Phoenix, who goes by Petty Fee on TikTok, and Blaec Lammers. Before showing you the video that the couple made that was widely scrutinized and then later deleted, I will explain the case of Blaec Lammers to you. It is important context that you need to know. I have opinions, I have things to say, but I think it's not entirely about like hating on this couple. I don't really want to be hating on anyone. I just think that it's important to talk about, you know, your past. It's important to be accountable and to show remorse for certain things. But there are themes about mental health issues, and I think how the current climate, particularly in America, kind of treats people with mental illness. So it's going to be a lot of that. So if you're kind of sensitive to that stuff, then maybe don't watch this video. So in 2009, Blaec had a psychotic episode at the age of roughly 17 to 18 years old of his age. During this psychotic episode, Blaec had gone to the local Walmart of Bolivar, Missouri, and stalked a cashier clerk with a mask on and a butcher's knife. Lammers had stated that he wanted to stab a Walmart employee to death, stalking them around the store. The sheriff's office had to be called to intervene. While Blake's mother, Mrs. Lammer, took efforts to get him to stay on his medication, he didn't like taking it and admitted that in the past he would cheek his medication, hiding the pills in his mouth and pretending to take them. And on November 12th and 13th of 2012, he purchased 2 assault rifles, a 22 caliber and a .223 caliber. He also bought ammunition from the same Bolivar Walmart that filled his prescription for antipsychotic and antidepressant medication. I believe it's the same place he got his guns too, I believe. Blaec then went with his girlfriend and a mutual friend to practice using the guns, as he had never handled them before. It is important to note here that Blake's own father, Mr. Lammers, had guns but kept them locked up, and he had them secured, which is the responsible thing to do if you're a gun owner, and his own father believed that his son Blaec should not handle guns. However, under Missouri law, it is apparently not required to do a mental health background check on people purchasing guns. And perhaps this is a sign that maybe they should start. So here's where the story of the guns gets kind of interesting. A couple of years after Blake's sentencing, a rather sympathetic CNN article comes out about Blaec. The reporter, Sanjay Gupta, interviewed Blaec from prison and wrote a very sad story about a boy whose parents fell in hard times, where he wasn't able to spend as much time with his father after selling their dirt bikes. They would go dirt biking like every single day, and the two were very close apparently, and Blaec was also like an outstanding student at one point, and then suddenly things just kind of seemed to fall off for him. According to the CNN journalist, Blaec told Sanjay Gupta that he had intended to give one of the guns to his father Blaec merely wanted another hobby to have with his dad to replace the loss of their dirt biking hobby. What makes little sense here, to me, is that we know his dad wouldn't trust him with guns, and that his dad already had firearms. Why would Blaec need to surprise him with one? And Blaec would have known his feelings about his parents and how they feel about him having firearms. So it begs the question, what changed, if anything? Or is it just another story told to make himself seem more innocent? We'll get there. So according to the documents State v. Lammers, the court documents talk about a lot of like the details of this case, and there are a lot of details that Blaec himself freely gave up, which pretty surprising actually. The court documents I think are really important, and I think a lot of people should read them. It's only 27 pages long. If anything, you probably don't need to read, I don't know, there's like a couple of pages of like signatures and stuff, and it's like, okay, whatever, dude. But for the most part, it's a pretty easy read and not that difficult. But we gain some further insight into this case against Blaec and testimony of people around him who said some very interesting things, but also informing us on the widespread concern of his support system and his ownership of these weapons in particular. So Blake's testing out the guns with his friends, and here's the story of how it goes after testing out the guns. After they'd finished, the friend took the guns to his apartment because Blaec did not want them at his parents' home, as he knew his mother would not approve of him possessing guns. The next day, Blaec moved the guns to the home of his girlfriend's father. So his girlfriend's father was aware of Blake's past mental health issues. I think that they were still pretty current. I think with Blake's issues, they're going to be with him for his whole life. It's not just something that kind of like passes and goes, right? So I empathize with him there. So the girlfriend's father hesitated but agreed to store the guns, and he testified at trial that he was kind of leery of taking the guns because he wondered whether they could have been stolen. So it seems like this girlfriend's father did not have a very good impression of Blaec or a very good thought of him, and you know, sometimes dads are kind of like that with their daughters and their daughters' boyfriends and stuff, so it could just be fatherly protection and stuff. However, the girlfriend's dad voiced the concerns to Blaec and indicated to Blaec, or told him, that he would be checking into the guns and handing them over to the authorities if they were indeed stolen or there were any issues. And then the girlfriend's father had stated that he did not believe Blaec intended to leave the firearms with him permanently. It was just a safe storage for the time being. I don't know what Blake's plan was after that, but he was under the impression it wasn't permanent. So then it further reads on that the girlfriend's father was also suspicious of why Blaec didn't want his mother to know about the guns. So, like any good parent, he dobbed on him and called, you know, Mrs. Lammer and informed her. And she was very concerned when she heard of that because she had no idea how he would have been, or that he was even in possession of 2 assault rifles. She had no idea where he would have obtained them from. So later that night, she was doing laundry. By the way, he's 20 years old, living with his parents, and his parents are doing his laundry. Like, okay. Sorry, that was like really judgmental, but thank God in a way, because while she was doing his laundry, she found a receipt from Walmart in his pants pocket, confirming that he had indeed purchased 2 assault rifles. So the next day, Mrs. Lammers drove down to the sheriff's office, showed them the receipts, and voiced her concerns about his, you know, Blake's mental illness. She was worried that he might not be taking his medication, and he should not be in possession of guns, and that's kind of where that goes. And so that's going to be a really interesting part of the story later on. I will say, in case you don't know, Blaec is apparently, according to a bunch of like news articles, he is diagnosed autistic. He's diagnosed antisocial personality disorder, BPD. Maybe that's like what the antisocial personality disorder is. Maybe that's the BPD? But yeah, he has BPD, borderline personality disorder. Is there something else? I guess he just has anxiety and depression and stuff as well, which those two kind of go hand in hand. Maybe it's depression, because he was taking antipsychotics and antidepressants, so I think the depression is like diagnosed. He's taking medication for it. As far as like anxiety, I don't know. But that's what we know about his supposed illnesses, right? So unfortunately, Mrs. Lammers, talking to the sheriff's office, she didn't realize that this would set the ball rolling on something that they'd never be able to turn back on. She merely wanted the officers to keep an eye on Blaec. She didn't expect an arrest to be made, and she probably didn't even think an arrest could be made. And to be clear, Blaec obtained these weapons completely legally. There was no illegalities in the way that he had obtained them. It was fine. It was fine to possess the guns, but later on the question is kind of like, well, why did you get the guns? Mrs. Lammer, Blake's mother, was worried that he was going to commit suicide, and so she was really concerned about that aspect of things, and I think that's why she went and talked to the police. I guess you could say, like, my first criticism here is, like, perhaps it would have been better, or things would have gone differently if maybe they not really confront Blaec, but try to have a heart-to-heart and talk to him about it, or maybe get an emergency session with like a psychologist, his psychiatrist. He had someone he was regularly seeing, apparently. But in saying that, it's like, it's probably easier to say than to do something like that. So, but then again, someone who you suspect is going to commit suicide, I don't know what it's like in Missouri. I don't know what the laws are. I don't know if you can, like, what is it, 5150 someone there? I don't know if you can get someone voluntarily held. I think, yeah, so from my Australian perspective, if you were worried about someone medically, you kind of just, I don't know, call an ambulance. It's pretty expensive, but if someone's having like you're like worried and concerned for their safety, usually you call an ambulance, they take them to the hospital, they get a evaluation, and if they're, you know, thought to be a danger to themselves or other people, mostly to themselves actually, I think, then they get held in a facility. Which sounds like very clinical of me to say. I kind of know how it works in Australia because I experienced it. I had someone that I had to visit every single week who was in a facility like that, and I think that for the most part, it's probably a pretty broken system everywhere. It's hard, but I think it's also really hard when you're dealing with someone who isn't really following treatment, who doesn't like the treatment that they're getting, like medication stuff. People who don't try with their medication or give up. I would say a lot of people give up on medication like too quickly. And I know it's hard because a lot of the medications, especially with Blake's case in 2012, maybe earlier than that, I imagine the process with like mental health and medication, it was so different back then. It is crazy to think of like how things have changed over time. So I do kind of empathize with that. It's a really hard situation to think, especially for the parents in this situation. You think like your parents, you have like kids, you have one kid who's really struggling hard and you just don't know what to do. And you try everything to get them to go with their treatment, but they just don't want to do it. What do you do when someone kind of refuses treatment? So later that day, officers attempted to perform a wellness check on Blaec, finding him at the Sonic drive-thru with his girlfriend in her car. How is there, okay, sidebar, how is there able to be a fast food place? This is a fast food chain, right? Sonic? How did they get the name Sonic? That's just like a interesting, why is it even called Sonic? I just think of like the game. Okay, anyway, moving on. Sorry, I don't mean to be silly about that, but I always think that when I hear Sonic, it just seems like, it seems like something that's not real. So the officers asked Blaec about his medication and the guns, and Blaec had explained that he simply planned to go hunting with them, but he didn't possess a hunting license at this time. The officers merely asked if he wanted to go to the station to talk further, and he agreed to. He wasn't restrained in any sort of way, and he even rode in the front seat of the car. Which is kind of crazy, because don't the police usually keep shotguns in the front of the car? Like, my god. So clearly this was kind of a consensual act. So he goes down to the Bolivar station or whatever, right? And he has an interview with a Bolivar police detective. None of Blake's possessions were removed, he was not handcuffed, he wasn't under arrest in any capacity, he was free to go at any point. At this point in the story, the detective wanted to know why Blaec had bought assault rifles. Blaec explained that he intended to go hunting with them, but abandoned the idea when he learned he would need to take a gun safety class in order to get a license. No mentioning of wanting to do it with his dad, or wanting to give one to Mr. Lammers. Interesting. The detective told Blaec that he didn't believe him because he went around his parents to obtain them, and they're not the type of guns that you go hunting with, typically. Now I'm noting here that the court documents say that Blaec actually contradicted himself here, because in one instance he said didn't know you needed a hunting license until like after buying the guns, but then at another point he says that he did know and he did have plans to get the license. Are we following that? Blaec then said he had never gone hunting before, then claimed he bought the assault rifles because he thought guns were just cool and just wanted to have them. So you see how his story kind of changes a little bit by bit? It's interesting. Some have deemed that to be interesting. Then Blaec says that he wanted to impress his father, but didn't want his dad to know about the guns because he would just say no. Blaec then also said his mother was also concerned about him becoming a mass shooter, which turned into Blaec explaining that he felt he shared a lot of similarities with mass shooters, being he was a loner and he struggled with homicidal thoughts, and I guess the mental illness aspect of that as well. During this interview, Blaec admitted to envisioning a mass shooting specifically at the Bolivar Walmart before buying the weapons, but changed his mind after practicing with them, or on them, I guess. Practicing with them, not on them. Blaec mentioned he watched a movie called April Showers, which is about the Columbine shooting. I haven't seen it myself. Blaec also mentions that his sister was in it. At what capacity, I'm not really sure, but his mother did say in a news article that Blaec was always in his sister Kristen's shadow, and that he didn't ask to be born different, but he just was. So while discussing this movie, April Showers, Blaec told the detective that he had these thoughts in his head and he didn't want them. He wondered what would happen if he ever did something that bad, and then said, "So I went out and bought them, the assault rifles." Again, he reiterates and says that after shooting the guns, he realized he didn't want to spend the rest of his life in jail, which here is where I thought, like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like, you shot the guns and you went, oh, I don't want to spend my life in jail. But there wasn't like any mention of like, oh, I realized that would mean killing a bunch of people, and actually that would ruin people's lives and everyone would be totally distraught, upset. That's like murder, yo. And that would suck. It's very much about him. There's like zero empathy in that response, and it's all just centered around himself and his own comfort, which I thought was pretty gross when thinking about taking the lives of many people. The detective pointed out to Blaec that he's no longer in school, he's 20 years old, so where would he perform a shooting? And then Blaec, being Blaec, he explained to the detective he would do it at Walmart. This man really had it out for the Bolivar Walmart for some reason. This guy really fucking hated this place. So Blaec admitted to reading a magazine before buying the guns at that Walmart, and it was a magazine about concealed carry weapons. And he thought, oh, that looks pretty cool. That is a quote. The detective asked him if that was the moment he decided to shoot up the Walmart, and Blaec said yes. He then asked about his mass shooting plan from start to finish, and Blaec explained it. Again, how the detective got this out of him is insane. Again, I have to remind you, Blaec was not under arrest. He came to this meeting freely with no pressures on him. Any lawyer would be absolutely screaming right now. So this is what Blaec described. When asked about his plan specifically from start to finish, Blaec stated that he would just walk into the Walmart, start shooting people at random, and wait until police arrived. The detective then questioned why. If his target was Walmart, why didn't he just act the same day he bought the guns? The detective asked the defendant if his actual target was a movie theater, due to similarities between these circumstances and the recent movie theater shooting in Aurora, Colorado, and the fact that the popular film The Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Part 2, was scheduled to premiere the same week that he had bought the assault rifles. And Blaec admitted he had considered shooting up the Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn Part 2 premiere, but then reaffirmed to him that his real target would have been the Walmart because there was sure to be many people there, and if he ran out of ammunition, he could easily reload. I don't know where, I want to correct the record on this because I know in my previous video, I said, in like my shorts, I said that he had tickets to go to the movie. I believe I was wrong about that. I don't know where I got that information from, so I'm going to correct the record here because that's important. So he had kind of just considered it. He didn't actually make any moves to do it, which I think is it an important distinction? I think so, because there's a difference between thinking about doing something and then taking an actionable step towards performing the thing that you want to act out. So, I mean, they're both really heinous things, don't get me wrong, but I think it's important to recognize that that wasn't something he really planned on doing, if that makes sense. It seems to me like the concrete plan was to shoot up the Walmart, and that seems to be it. So when it comes to the movie theater allegations, he admitted he thought about going, and it just so happened that the same week he bought the rifles, the Twilight movie saga Breaking Dawn Part 2, the last movie, was scheduled to premiere. Whether it was a coincidence or not, I don't think so. I guess you could argue that there was an initial plan, because if he bought the guns the same week that it was happening, there must have been some kind of plan at first, and then he must have changed up his idea of like the tactic he wanted to use and then thought like, oh, Walmart would be more practical. So I feel like you could kind of argue perhaps that there was a point in time where he had a plan for the Twilight movie, which is horrific to think about, honestly. I mean, it's horrific to think about the last shooting that happened, or the one that happened in this time at the Batman movie. So to conclude this part of the Blaec's story, after the interview was over, Blaec was then placed under arrest. It says in the court documents, at the conclusion of the interview, the detective placed defendant under arrest, charging him with attempted first-degree assault under section 565.050, armed criminal action under section 571.015 for committing first-degree assault by use of a deadly weapon, and making a terroristic threat under section 574.115 RSMO Sup 2002. I believe the terroristic threat was, they kind of threw that out, the court. They went like, it's not a terroristic threat. Further in the court documents, we get reiterated the fact that Blaec was never under arrest, he consensually went to the police station to talk, and he was never under arrest during the meeting with the detective, and was always free to go. It was his words and what he said that put him in jail, as the law states. Section 565.050 states that a person commits the crime of assault in the first degree if he attempts to kill or knowingly causes or attempts to cause serious physical injury to another person. A person attempts to commit a crime under section 564.011 when, with the purpose of committing the offense, he does any act which is a substantial step towards the commission of the offense. Accordingly, to be convicted of attempted first-degree assault, defendant must have 1. Had the purpose to commit that offense, and 2. Committed some act that is a substantial step towards completing the offense. To act purposefully is to have the conscious object to engage in certain conduct or to cause a certain result. A substantial step is defined as conduct which strongly is corroborative of the firmness of the actor's purpose to complete the commission of the offense. So what does that all mean? I'll explain it. Blaec tried to argue in his defense that he never thought of shooting people until after purchasing the weapons, but this is inconsistent with his statement given to the detective. He gave a detailed description of how he watched a movie about Columbine, thought about what might happen if he did it, bought the guns, tested them out, tried them out, practiced with them, and then apparently decided he wasn't going to go through with it. Now, in court, he's saying he never thought of shooting people until after the fact, probably because if you think of shooting people, then buy guns to use and then practice with them, the law can see that as a substantial step to commit the offense. As the court says, Blake's own statement offers enough direct evidence of intent and his own confessed fantasy of performing a Columbine-style shooting, while also buying weapons after that fact, practicing with them, with an experienced, person with guns. His friend was like a gun person, I guess. And then hiding them from his parents who are already concerned about him becoming a mass shooter. The case really writes itself. So here's the citation, the filing, for why you can be jailed even if you haven't done anything. The question is, the court must answer in determination whether the defendant took a substantial step is whether this conduct was strongly corroborative of the firmness of defendant's purpose to complete the offense. Section 564.011, effective in 1979, lowered the threshold needed to find the offense by rejecting the requirement of an act of perpetration and adopting the substantial step test of the model penal code. The result was the emphasis was shifted away from what an actor had left to accomplish and refocused instead on what the actor had already done. And it says in the footnotes, the comments to the 1973 proposed section 564.011 highlight the reason for the change. The policy underlying the shift in emphasis from what has yet to be done to what has been done is that the law is not interested merely in punishing dangerous acts, but also in neutralizing dangerous individuals. Which I think we can all agree, the law neutralizing harmful individuals who have not only thought about harming, but who apparently carried out steps to make that a reality, potentially, should be stopped in their tracks. I think it's easy for me to say that I would much rather one person go to jail if it prevents them from killing like 20, 30, 15 people, whatever the number is. So that kind of sums up Blake's case and why he was in jail. He, at the current time, kind of talks about it and talks about it being a thought crime. He was arrested for like a thought crime and that he had never really tried to do anything bad. Kind of want to make up your own opinion about this one, I think. For me personally, I feel like there's a big problem, I think, with America in particular, and like the complication of having guns so readily available, is that people with mental illness, they struggle, they have issues, and it's not really always a linear, it's probably never a linear way for them to get stabilized in society, and I think a lot of people don't end up being stabilized. In that case, making sure that those people can't get guns would probably be like the first thing I'd want to do in creating a society. Make sure that mentally ill people can't get guns. I'd want a society where people just can't get guns. I'm pretty happy with the Australian society and our approach to guns. I know we had that issue recently. We had a couple of issues recently. It's not perfect. The system isn't built in a way where it's going to be zero-sum. There's always going to be outliers and stuff, but I think that there could have been so many more instances in Australia where we could have had mass shootings, school shootings. You know, depression and mental illness isn't really something that's unique to America or unique to any country. We all kind of face those issues. The thing is that America is one that has a really big problem with these school shootings, with, you know, poor individuals who really just need help. They just need guidance. They need to talk to people who are sane and not be on like fucking 4chan and shit like that, or watching and romanticizing this idea of like shooting people. I think that's a very dangerous society to have, and that might be my controversial Australian opinion, but I think that this whole situation with Blaec totally could have been prevented if there was more checks around, you know, guns, especially in his state. But also if guns were maybe just harder to get in general. But I know a lot of people like their guns. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be able to, like, go hunting if you get, like, a license and stuff. Like, I think that's good. I think if you want to go hunting, there should be places in, you know, checks in place. And some people might think, like, oh, well, just because I'm mentally ill, I shouldn't be able to have a gun. I think that it's important to take into account people's history. You know, Blaec had a history where, you know, he was pretty known to the local police. He had been to that Walmart before, stalking someone with a knife. That was apparently when he went cold turkey off his medication. I think that that's a pretty crazy thing that he was still able to get a weapon. Not one weapon, 2 weapons actually. I understand that in America it's kind of the gun thing is kind of like a sensitive issue, but I think that this could have been completely avoided. So, you might be wondering why I have my headphones on. We're about to watch a podcast where Blaec Lammers actually appeared. It's called the Why Not Mindset. Why not? Why not? Why not? And so, this guy who's interviewing him asks Blaec who, like, if there was any type of support system that he had when he kind of just went out of exited jail and stuff. Now, I will say, I think that this podcast does touch on some, like, really important issues with, like, the prison system. I think that there's a lot of issues that Blaec highlights about, like, what it's like getting out of jail, reintegrating into society, the lack of support in the system itself. When you leave, it's really hard, apparently, or it's really annoying trying to get, like, your driver's license after prison, trying to apply for things, buying stuff. It's really difficult, and I wholeheartedly empathize with him. I'm someone who believes that the prison system should be something that's built to rehabilitate and get people back on track with their lives, instead of just like a form of punishment for, like, doing something, or I guess in Blake's case, thinking of attempting to do something? Yeah, and you decide what you think on that one. So here's what he has to say about his support system.
Was there any type of support that you had when you got out?
I'd have to say my mom. My mom's the biggest support, even though she's the one that got this ball started and she kind of turned me in. But since then, she has been my biggest support, advocate, ally. I don't know, she's always.
So Blaec is kind of the opinion that his mum is the one who turned him in, who got this whole thing started. It's all her fault. Which I got to say, I thought that was like a really... I gotta say, didn't like hearing that. Didn't like hearing that at all. I think there's like a disregard on Blake's side, or a dismissiveness of his part in all this, his role that he played. And I think that, you know what, in all the articles I read, I really felt really bad for his parents, because they had struggled with the guilt of what had happened to him, of him going to jail that day, of, like, you know, maybe there wasn't anything to be concerned about. You know, I think they've gone through all the emotions about this, and the fact that he still blames his mum when she was just worried about him, and after everything that he confessed to in the interview that he didn't have to do, I'm gonna reiterate that he had done nothing wrong by buying those guns. He was not under arrest at any point. He didn't even have to go to the police station to begin with. Okay? So, listen. I think that him talking about his mum in that way, I know he goes like, oh, she's my biggest advocate, my biggest ally, whatever. I still feel kind of like, you need to own up to what you did. You need to take accountability. Because, and this is more like advice, if you want to make it here on the internet and be like an internet person, people really don't like it when you just don't own up to things, when you just kind of go like, oh well, defensive mode, you know? Like, Pirate Software kind of comes to mind. I don't expect Blake to know who that is. I don't expect him to know who that is, but I'm just saying that if people are calling you out for something, and I think it's a fair thing to call you out for, then own up to it. Say you fucked up, move on. I think it kind of is sometimes just that simple. No one likes someone who's like overly defensive about themselves. I think that when it comes to a lot of situations, there's rarely situations where some people are like completely in the right and can prove that they were completely in the right, you know? With Blake, the evidence is pretty stacked against him. His own words, too. But he does say that if his mother wasn't alive, he probably would have just done his full prison sentence in prison instead of going for parole. He's on parole now until the end of 2027. So, yeah. Alright, but that's just something that I found in this interview, and yes, I watched the whole thing. Again, they touched on some good things here. And you know what I think? I think that there could be a future where maybe Blaec Lammers, if he was like not as like self-defensive about like what happened in his past, he's very much the type of person I've noticed who is like, don't judge me for my past, don't use Google. He says in this video, don't use Google to look me up. Like, just the moment you use Google to look him up, you're not getting to know who he is. And yes, it's been 13 years. I'm sure there's probably things that have changed with him. I'd hope so, and I think that would be great if that's happened. But at the same time, you can't really expect people to not go looking into what you did. You can't expect people to read about like the court documents, read what happened, read what you said, and not kind of feel a little bit fearful of the potential. You know, I think that I like to believe he's changed. I like to believe that. But I think a lot of people are kind of wary of it. I think, however, with his platform, he could do a lot of good by talking more about what it's like being someone who is in the prison system, leaving the prison system, and maybe even making content to help support people who are also leaving the prison system themselves. I think that's a great cause to have, because I do think that's a really hard issue, and I don't think there's a lot of support out there for those issues. So I think bringing awareness to that, I think that's important, and I think that's good. And I think if he approached this issue of his past with more of like a, I was saved from a something even worse that could have happened, right? Because he admitted that he had thought about doing things, he'd taken actionable steps towards completing that. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he would have just done a mass shooting. Still, he's pretty adamant, I think, I would say. Well, it's interesting, actually, because he says that he wanted to take the guns and give one to his dad, and I suppose he just wanted to connect with his father with, like, firearms. But it's so interesting to me that that story only appeared in the CNN article by Sanjay Gupta. And yeah. And at the end of that article, interestingly, Sanjay told the Lammers, particularly Mr. Lammers, that Blake had bought the guns because he wanted to hang out with his dad, and his dad, at the end of the article, was at a loss for words after hearing that. I don't know what that means. I mean, I'm not really sure. So that's that interview. Now I think we can get onto the now deleted video of the couple, the long-awaited deleted TikTok. I have to say, I'm so happy that I actually screen recorded that video, because there was a sense in my mind. I was like, I just thought to myself, like, this is so juicy. There's gonna be like fallout from this video, and typically when people aren't used to getting like called out for things or having like haters and being I don't know, judged. A lot of the time people just kind of default to deleting stuff and going private, turning off comments. Now, what I will say about this couple, I don't approve of people who might be allegedly doxing them. After deleting this video from their TikTok, Petty Phoenix, she was kind of posting about like doxing laws in her state and how, like, you know, it's illegal for people to be doing that. It's not good. Yada yada yada, right? So don't do that, guys. If anyone here is watching this and is thinking of doing that, don't do it. It's illegal. I guess it kind of depends what country you're from, right? I think most countries are like, I'm not gonna speak on that, but I'm just gonna say, from like a moral standpoint as well, it's like, don't do it. You don't need to do that shit. It's not gonna fix anything. It's not gonna change anything. It's just gonna make these two individuals, even if anything, feel more emboldened and more defensive of themselves. And I think we'd like them to learn and grow as creators and realize that maybe it's important to be upfront and honest about these things and to maybe just like not treat it. You know, let's just watch the video so you know what I'm talking about. Alright, so here's the video. You can see I saved it on my TikTok. I was like, I'm saving this. Double. Yeah, so you can see this is part 2, marrying a man that just spent 13 years in prison. I think this was I don't know what part 1 was. I think this is more a response to the Valentine's sort of video that she did, where she was talking about being engaged to a man who just spent 13 years in prison. So this is Blaec Lammers now. This is his partner, Phoenix? I don't know if that's her real name. I don't care. It's just Petty Phoenix. Let's go. Alright, let's watch this.
We're gonna do a part 2 to commonly asked questions that we've been receiving. He's here with me. He is not fake. He's a real person. So we're just gonna get into some of the questions that we've been getting. He bought the ring with his own money from his own job, and it is on the 4th finger of my left hand.
Yeah, so a lot of people were talking about this couple, and a lot of people were kind of saying that she was like the money person. He was just using her for like her assets or whatever. Listen, I don't know. I've been hearing, this is what I've heard as rumors, so take this for what you will. Rumor is that she's a 30-year-old woman who was just living with her mum, and she only just moved out and then moved in. Well, he moved in with her, and she asked him to move in with her. But she was apparently living with her mum for a while. Which, honestly, like, can we judge people for that? I mean, it's kind of an issue that a lot of people are facing, especially like the current economy, the current climate. I feel like I don't super judge people for that. I don't know her story specifically, so maybe there's a reason why people are judging her for that, but apparently she's also known to the law and stuff, but I don't know I don't know if I would like really put too much credence to those things. Honestly, what I did notice when I was looking up Mr. Lammers over here, Blaec, I keep wanting to call him Brandon, I don't know why. So when I was looking up stuff about Blaec, there were a couple of snark I think there was a snark subreddit already up talking about this lady. It is crazy. The cycle from like TikTok to snark subreddit is really insane, I would say. I didn't look at it though at all. I was like, I want to look at like the articles, because this is kind of the kind of situation where I feel like there's probably a lot of bullshit going around, and I wanted to consume more of like news articles and that.
So it is in the right place for everybody that was concerned about that. Me personally, yes, I do have a son. No, he does not live with me. I placed him for adoption when he was a baby.
Jesus. Holy trauma dump. Okay. So, Phoenix at one point had a baby and placed him for adoption, which is... That's a sad and difficult thing, but perhaps it was the right thing for her to do. So, you know, I'm trying to be diplomatic here, you know? But is that a sign of someone's character? I don't know. I mean, I'd hate to really judge a woman for something like that, because I feel like I don't know the situation. I don't know what happened. It's probably for the best, sadly. It's an unfortunate situation. So about the money. Okay, let's talk about the money. Jesus Christ. So I kind of believe Blaec. I want to call him Brandon just then. I believe Blaec when he says that like he has like a bit of money and stuff, and you know the ring, like the ring doesn't look all that like crazy to me. Like I could believe that he bought her a ring, and you know he apparently bought a brand new Bronco or something. I don't know cars, dude, but in that podcast I was showing you, Blaec talks a lot about how when he left prison, I think he got a job the first week he got out or something. He applied to like this place, and the next day they talked and they accepted him to work for them. Apparently it's some sort of organization that helps inmates get jobs, and it's like a really like religious organization. Blaec said that apparently every single morning he has to be there at work at 5 every single morning. They're like saying prayers to like Jesus Christ the Lord or something, and just making it all centered around like God and stuff. And so and the way that Blaec talked about it, it seems to me like he's found Jesus, he's found God. He's like seemed very religious to me from what he was saying. So I mean, good for him. Sometimes religion like helps people find purpose. It helps people get, I guess, on the straight and narrow, I guess you call it. Religion can help people sometimes. It's good for structure sometimes. Sometimes people really need structure, they need faith. So I'm not going to judge him hard for like that aspect, but he did also say that because of just being out of jail, there were moments where he was thinking about prison, where he was like contemplating like, should I go back in there? Should I just like not do parole and just go back to where it's like familiar? But he decided that he would work really long hours, so he was working like 70 hours or something, and he said it was like really grueling, it was really tough, but that's like what he says he was doing. So I could imagine that if he was working like a lot of hours from early morning to late night, then yeah, and that was to distract him from those thoughts about like prison and stuff. So it's like I could see him. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he bought a car right out of jail, like a brand new car from the dealership, by the way. You know, he seemed pretty chuffed about that. Where did he get the money from? I don't know what happened. I don't know what the details are about that. Could he be lying about things? He could be. Yeah, you know, like that's the thing. That's the thing. I feel like, you know, he was lying in that interview, I think, in my opinion, with that detective. Doesn't seem like a stretch to me that maybe he'd be lying about stuff in a podcast interview, but I digress.
Big one was, am I a sex offender? I am not a sex offender. I'm not registering. I actually went to prison for a violent crime, supposedly. I mean, I'll further disclose all that later on. I was actually out of prison 4 months before I met Phoenix. I got out in August, met her in December, so I did not get out home playing with.
Cool. They're engaged. You wanna know what month it is? It's February. I think they got engaged after 6 6 weeks? 6 weeks. No, it could have been 6 weeks. Whatever. They got engaged like Valentine's Day, dude. They got engaged Valentine's Day. They met in December. The math ain't math in there, hun.
With her. I'm not using it for her house, car, money, tax refund. Like some people are thinking I'm tax season, so I'm using her for money.
The tax refund is a big one.
I have my own job. I have a car of my own that I bought 3 months out of prison, because people, when they get out of prison, they can get jobs. There's second chance companies out there that hire.
Okay, yeah, so that's where I guess maybe I got it wrong. I thought he bought the car like right out of getting out of prison. Okay. Honestly, you could probably put together a timeline from like when he did the interview. I didn't check. I can't be bothered. I can't be fucked. Is this really that serious? I don't know. But yeah, okay. All right.
Felons. So when people think that people out of prison can't get jobs, that's a lie. That's an assumption that they just want to tell themselves that everyone in prison is a bad person and they have to be there. It's not.
That's not what people think. I hope so anyway. I hope people are aware that the recidivism rate for like prisoners and stuff is so bad because, again, I don't think people get the support that they need in prison and out of prison to rehabilitate into society in a way that like makes sense. You know, when you've been in prison for like who knows how long, you're in this environment where everything is super ultra structured. You're not really treated like a human being, but you also have people that you know there. Hopefully you have friends. Hopefully you have like a group of people. I don't know. Some cases, maybe nothing. But there's like a structure to it that you get used to and you get assimilated into. And then leaving that and going back to the real world, and in Blake's case, he went to jail like 2012. So he was not around for a lot of tech changes in the world, you know, like there's issues with people who like they get out of prison and suddenly everything's like iPads, touch screens, you know, the whole world is changed so much. And I think maybe a lot of people don't understand it like that, but everything is so daunting, everything is so crazy, and then people just end up going back to jail because it's like that's what they're familiar with, that's what they know, that's what they end up being comfortable with. But it's not that like these people are necessarily bad people, it's just that I think, and I agree, I think that the system is extremely flawed and not built in a way that's meant for people to really heal and change. Because I do think people can change. I think there's a lot of people who are great examples of people who are changed after going to prison. But is it like the rate that we would want it to be? And you know, you gotta make sure to mention that, you know what, there's gonna be a percentage of people who just are like, they just don't give a fuck, and they just will keep repeat offending. Some people are just really like that. And then it's like, you gotta ask yourself, well, what am I gonna do? Like, what do we do about the people who don't want to take their medication, who don't want help, who just want to keep doing, like, harming others? What do you do about those people? I'm talking more broadly now. I'm like, what do you do about those people? What do you do with those people who aren't participating in society the way that makes society okay and relatively safe to live in, right?
It's not true. You see all the time on the news, people are wrongly convicted that get out of prison after 1, 2, 3 decades of a crime that they did not commit. So it happens. People go to prison for almost no crime happening. So if you want to, you should probably do your own research before you actually assume something.
So this is what people were really, I think, so enraged about, is that he keeps going like, I supposedly did something. I mean, I didn't really do anything, but I went to jail for no fucking reason. Yada yada yada. I didn't do nothing. And then people are reading the court document, people are doing their own research, like he said, like he told them to do. And people, including me, are finding out that it's so much worse than what he kind of lets on. And I think that's where people kind of feel that there's like a dishonesty happening here. Like, sure, maybe Blaec had a lot of time in prison to think about what happened and to kind of convince himself, maybe talking with his lawyer, maybe talking to his support system and just like convincing himself that like there was never going to be anything that would come out of having the guns and practicing and then, you know, the Walmart and stuff. It's one of those things where it's probably action was done to put him in jail to prevent something. And that's the thing about preventing stuff, is that sometimes like it is kind of like, well, just maybe nothing was going to happen. But then you think about the testimony of the girlfriend's dad and how he thought Blaec wasn't going to give him the guns forever. There was a point where Blaec was going to take them back. Now, the question might be, maybe he was planning to convince his parents to let him have guns, but if his parents were concerned about him either committing suicide or becoming a mass shooter to the point where even their own guns in their own home were like completely off limits, it's like, you just gotta think to yourself, like, there's no world where I just think that that's like the reality of things. Whereas someone who's like dealing with a lot of mental illness, struggling, not taking their medication, you know, you have to think like then that person like consuming material, romanticizing mass shootings, then going out buying the guns, buying the weapons, but buying the ammo, guns that also you do not take hunting typically. Like, you piece the story together, maybe you don't have a case, but then when the suspect actually just goes, oh yeah, so this is what I thought about doing, you can see how maybe the state felt pretty comfortable putting this guy in jail, because it just didn't seem like it was that unlikely.
But other than that,
I mean, yes, it was a violent charge, but nobody, not a single soul got hurt.
no.
And this is where I got really mad, because I feel like they're ignoring when he went to the Walmart in 2009 and stalked the cashier, the clerk, with a weapon, by the way. Stalking them, and by his own statement, wanting to stab them to death. His excuse is that he went cold turkey off his medication. And in the podcast, he talks about how going cold turkey off his medication caused him to have these thoughts, and like, it was the kind of thing where, like, any thought he had to impulsively just do it. So if the thoughts told him, like, get a weapon, there's no plan afterwards, just get a weapon. It's interesting how his language was so specific that he had these mental thoughts of, like, get the weapon, don't think of what the next step is, and once you got the weapon, what's the next step? Okay, do the next step. It's like, yeah, that to me sounds like a dangerous individual, to be honest. Whether he should have been imprisoned and not just taken to a place where he could maybe go and see doctors and get proper care, I think, yeah, it probably would have been preferable that he just got medical care. But then it's like, again, this guy has a history of not taking his medication, refusing treatment. What are you going to do? What do we do about that?
I'll even tell you the 2 charges was a first-degree assault and armed criminal action. If you want to look into that and the definition of those 2 charges, all you have to do is Google it and it'll tell you.
And you were 19.
I was 19 years old.
Everything says he was 20. Everything says he was 20 years old. Now, I read maybe up to towards like 7-10 articles. Not a single one said he was 19 years old. So, did the countless reporters get it wrong? Or are these two kind of fudging the numbers a little bit to make it seem a little bit more like innocent? Like, oh, he was 19, he was basically a baby, he didn't know what he was doing.
Struggling
I got
with
sentenced to 15 years, but did 13 of it.
Through parole.
So he's going to be on parole for 2 years. We are waiting until that is over to get legally married. So that's going to be the end of 2027.
Yeah. Oh.
Which I think is alright. Like, a lot of people were like, girl, you were already engaged, and it's only been like 6 weeks, it's only been like a month, maybe? I don't fucking know the timeline. It's been like maybe at best 2 and a bit months, at best. Engaged? Holy shit. But then it's like, well, okay, I guess they can't legally get married until he's finished his parole, so it's like end of 2027. Do you think that's enough time? Leave a comment down below what you think about the timeline. For me personally, I think that they're probably still very much in the honeymoon phase, and now that they're living together, things are going to change. It hasn't even, someone even pointed out in the comments, it hasn't even been a full billing cycle. Yeah, that's going to be relevant. Listen, that's going to be relevant.
And another thing is, I bought the flowers in the ring with my own money from the job that I have. Actually got promoted at the job, so people with felonies can get jobs. They don't just come out and start selling drugs again and go out there and abusing women. People do change. They get jobs. There's companies that actually hire it's a second chance company. So, I mean, it's just...
And then I asked him to move in. I was not a fallback plan. I wasn't his plan B or C. He had a stable living situation before meeting me. We met on Tinder, and then we met for the first time in person at a local coffee shop.
I don't know. I mean, her being like, I'm the one who asked him to move in with me. Okay, well then we're gonna start looking to you and being like, okay, what is your judgment like? What is your judgment of people like? interesting. I wonder what that's gonna be like. I wonder if she's like a good judge of character or something.
There's been some confusion about that. We kind of never expected these videos to do anything, so we've just been kind of bombarded by.
Also, I have to say, like, her being like, we didn't expect these videos to do anything. Bitch, please. She titles so much of her content as, like, titling, like, my man, it was spent 13 years in prison. I'm a, hashtag prison talk. I feel like that title alone, talking about your fiance having spent 13 years in prison, that gets people interested, and I feel like she kind of knows that because she keeps using that in a lot of her videos. And I think one of the videos that the Valentine's engagement announcement video got like 1.9 million views. BT dubs.
A lot of questions, but no, I asked him to move in. We split all of the household bills.
It hasn't been a full billing cycle, but okay.
And that was something that he wanted.
Yeah, she tried to tell me no at first because no one.
Oh, excuse my chin there. She tried to tell me no at first? Ugh. Let's not say that. Blaec, here's some advice. Don't say that.
I've never done that with her, and this is not her first relationship.
I'm joking.
Some comments are saying that she
I
never
don't
had
say
a
that.
boyfriend.
Yeah.
That's not true. And I mean, I have a kid myself, so she does not live with me.
Yeah.
So right now, it's just.
Blaec drops a bombshell of all bombshells. Both of these individuals have children that are not in their lives. Okay. Yep. 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 So, somewhere when Blaec was 20 years old, I'm guessing, maybe even earlier, he had a kid? Because I don't think he had a kid when he was in jail, because I don't know if he would have had, what do they call it? Concubine rights or something? Some kind... I don't know what it's called, but I don't think he had the... I don't know if he, like, saw someone while he was in jail and got them pregnant somehow or something. But he has a daughter somewhere. And it's like, considering he went to jail when he was 20, like, you gotta think that he could have had a kid when he was, like, 19. But it's interesting that, like, no articles really mention that he's, like, a father. Which is, like, of course, you want the utmost privacy for those people, like, his family, like, his, ex-partner who is the mother. You would want privacy for those people, and I respect that, so I think that's important, but I think dropping that little, like, tidbit, both of these people have kids that they do not see, that are not in their lives, and... You know, I do hope that there could be a time where Blaec, you know, can get the ability to see his kid, maybe, like, maybe actually try and be a father, I suppose. Like, because I do kind of believe in people, you know, having chances. This would technically probably be his third chance, though, because he had the Walmart, and then, the guns thing, thinking about the Walmart. So this is him having his third chance, I would say. Yeah. Listen, am I wrong? Technically, this is his third chance. Not his second chance. It's interesting that they don't talk really about the Walmart incident, like the real Walmart incident with the knife. Weird.
Me and her in this household, and
I think the judgment that we're receiving, like, for me, about me having kids already, and saying, like, I'm gonna be on the first 48, or there's gonna be, like, a docu-series about when he unalives me, those are kind of, like, the hardest to take in. I understand the concern. I have had a long line of very toxic relationships, and
again, it just kind of writes itself, doesn't it? I've experienced toxic relationships before, and this is not that.
I know this is not that.
What do you mean? How do you know this is not a toxic relationship when you've only been together for maybe 2 and a bit months, at best? How can you say that, like, you know that this is not toxic? And yeah, that's the thing about a lot of toxic relationships, as you should probably fucking know if you've been in a long line of them, which is a red flag in itself. Sorry, but it kind of is. It's like, a lot of the time, people, they do this thing called love bombing. They do this shit where it's like, they make all these promises, everything's wonderful, everything's fantastic. It's like a whirlwind romance, and then before you know it, you're married to them, you're stuck with them, and they're abusing you. I mean, just recently it happened to another, an Australian TikToker. Veruca Salt, I think her name is. It just recently happened to her. She went to, I think, America, got married to a guy she met 2 weeks in. She also has BPD, I think. I'm not really totally certain about that. She, yeah, she's been struggling, and everyone told her, don't get married to this guy, you only met him 2 weeks ago. She gets married to him. Not even a week later, I think, she is separated from him because he was being domestically abusive and was also mooching off of her. I guess. Listen, that's a completely different story, but this is like, that's why people are judging you. Like, they're talking about, like, how, oh, people are judging us and we don't deserve to be judged by, and it's like, I don't think it's meant to be like, there's probably a lot of people writing mean comments, which is like, don't read the comments, lady, but I think there's a lot of people who are genuinely concerned and just want you to be okay. And so far, this whole story is not ticking a lot of boxes for confidence.
And it's really sad for me to see that, like, just how quickly the judgment can come on when you don't know someone. I found out about his past before I even met him, because I was able to read the articles that are out there, and I came to my own opinion.
So she read the articles. Did she read the court document? Because when you look up Blaec Lammers, for me personally, the first two, like, top articles was, I think, the Tampa Bay Times, and then the second one was the CNN article. And I have to say, like, I'm still of the opinion, I think that CNN article was kind of running defense for this guy a little bit hard. I think it's important to point out the flaws of these systems in place and call to attention, maybe, like, call for reform of these systems, maybe changing things, making things better. But I don't think you should do it in a way where it's like, oh, well, this guy didn't do anything wrong, he's just mentally ill. And it's like, yeah, he was mentally ill, but he was also, I would say, irresponsible? I don't know, like that's what makes it so tough, is that, like, yeah, sometimes people genuinely are just, like, they're mentally ill, maybe you could say they were out of their mind, they were under the influence of, like, quitting their medication. So maybe they were doing things that were out of character. And then there are other times where it's like, well, a lot of people have mental illness struggles, a lot of people have issues, depression, a lot of feelings about their life and things, but I would say for the most part, a majority of people deal with it in a less harmful manner. And, you know, I guess that, like, statistically, there's always going to be outliers with that. And I think maybe Blake's just an outlier with that. And that's why this could have all been avoided, I think, if we just didn't have this fucking... I say we. I'm not American. If America just didn't have this problem with their fucking guns. And you know what the other thing is like, his parents were doing the right thing. It's just so unfortunate that they're stuck with this lifetime of guilt around it. And it's like, they did everything, I would say, it seems like they did everything right. And they were so conscientious about the gun thing, they even had their own guns locked up, and they didn't want him handling them, didn't think he should be handling them. And they were the ones, I guess, who made this all, well, they didn't make it all happen. I hate playing into that argument because, again, you know the case, yada yada, right?
And that was, no one got hurt.
Thank God.
They did arrest him. Nothing was going to happen. And also, it was a...
And she keeps calling him 19, and he's even agreeing with her. Mate, you were there. You know what age you were.
19-year-old that was struggling with mental health stuff.
And again, it's like, you're struggling with mental health stuff, like, you know what? Boo-hoo. A lot of us struggle with fucking mental health, and we don't go wanting to commit homicide or struggle with homicidal thoughts. I think struggling with homicidal thoughts, that's a you thing, buddy. That's something that you're dealing with. And the thing is, I think he was seeing, like, he was getting help. He had a psychiatrist, a psychologist, I think. Bro was getting help. But, like, at a certain point, you have to take responsibility for things, right? And I think this is what a lot of people were upset about. It's just a lack of accountability.
Stuff. So, for that, for me, it was like, okay, nobody got hurt. And I think everybody deserves a second chance without crazy judgment. And I took some time to reflect on that before
she actually met him in person. She reflected. Listen, I'm just gonna say, if he messaged you on Tinder being like, hey yo, I was in prison for 13 years, you can look it up, here's my stuff, I'd love to get coffee with you sometime. She's like, I took some time before I met him. Dude, I'm telling you, her taking time was, she skimmed the CNN article, I bet, and then she looked at his profile, looked at them arms, and went, okay, that's enough time, let's do it.
I actually met him in person. So, I think that is it.
Yeah, and if there's any more questions you want to ask, just ask them.
Yeah. It is getting out there, his name, and
mugshot photos and articles,
just because it did go national.
This was a national story. I guess it was such a big story because a lot of them really talked about like how the mother was the one who sort of alerted the authorities to what was happening. And again, it's like, I still wonder about that as like the first thing that they did was going to the police instead of like, I don't know, like some sort of medical assistance. But I mean, when you're scared about something happening, especially like your kid committing suicide, it's like, a lot of people you don't have like a handbook for how to like treat that stuff. So at the end of the day, it's like, I wouldn't want to blame the parents for any of it anyway, you know?
And I think we'll probably talk about this a little bit more at a different time because it is it's a interesting and complicated situation when someone that age spent that long in prison when nothing exactly happened. So
nothing exactly happened. It's like, if someone in the court documents, they cited a case called S or something like that. Mr. S or something. And they talk about this case where a man had gone to bed with a little boy and used the little boy's hand to place on his crotch over his clothes. And then after the little boy went to sleep, the man left the room. And they cite this case in the court documents with Lammers to talk about like the difference between like the intention to do something and actually carrying out doing something, and whether you can really try someone for what they've done and go, well, they were going to do this other thing too. So I might be understanding the case that they were citing here, but I think his defense counsel were citing this case saying like, listen, Mr. S did use the little boy's hand on his clothes over the clothes on his, but you can't say that he wanted like first degree molestation, which is skin to skin. But then like I think the court kind of disagrees and goes, well, like, you know that like he was going to get there. Like if anyone who's like putting a little boy's hand on their crotch, even if it's just over the clothes, it's like you can kind of surmise that at a point there was going to be like further down the line maybe. But I think I might be misreading that, so that's why I say you should go and read that article for the court document for yourself, because it is interesting to think about, like, where we draw the line. Like, listen, nobody wants to be in jail for thought crimes. No. But, again, I just find this case to be so bizarre that it was, like, this guy didn't need to say all the stuff that he did, and yet he said it anyway. He He just... In the CNN article, they write that his psychologist or psychiatrist said that due to his autism diagnosis, excuse me, he's susceptible to being overstimulated, and that being in that sort of interrogation, I guess, which he was free to go at any time, BT dubs, he would have done anything to get out of it, and that includes lying. That's what his doctor said. And so there's like kind of whole narrative of like now where it's like, oh well, people who are like neurodivergent get, I guess, fucked over in the interrogation system, which I do agree that happens. But whether it happened here, I don't know. It says in the CNN article that Blaec said he only said what he thought the detectives wanted him to hear. I don't know. I honestly can't tell you what went on with that. And I don't know how exactly interrogation differs for people who are like neurodivergent and stuff like that. I think at the time it was definitely not as well like thought about, especially not in like the current day. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know, like I don't have an intention to be like, yo guys, let's get our pitchforks and like fuck this guy up. I don't intend to be like that. I read through like all the things that I think were important, and my own conclusion is I think that, you know, you fucked up, own up to it, and stop blaming your mother. Stop blaming your fucking mother, dude. But yeah, so these people, she's changed her account, and now it's a joint account between him and her, which I thought, again, like, red flag, red flag. Like, you don't need to have a joint account with your partner. Like, have your own space, have your own account. Why do you need to have a joint account with them? Because, I'm gonna be real, this is what my, like, cynical brain thinks. She realized just how much of a scoop the 13-year-old boyfriend who was in prison, 13-year-old, oh my god, no, scratch that. She knows just how much of a scoop it is saying that her husband or her fiance, her boyfriend, was in jail for 13 years, and people will go crazy reading that, watching it, commenting. You'll get so much traction from that because people are just so interested in that shit. My cynical brain thinks that she's trying to make this into like a job, a career. And to be honest, I wouldn't mind so much if it was centered around, you know, a prison life, or like the life of someone who is a prisoner after prison, the life of someone who's navigating all the struggles of that, and maybe even trying to help people either avoid prison or like not do bad things. Such a reduction of like that, but not do bad things. Bad thing bad, you know? But so like you can see like where I'm kind of like, I'm like there could be a path for these people to go down, which would, I think, be positive and good, and people would like it. You know, if he was like I could really see himself branding himself as the guy who's like, who was almost a school, or not school, but almost a mass shooter, but then he kind of turned his life around, and I think that's a good story, you know? You know, if he did do the mass shooting, you know what? He wouldn't be here right now doing this TikTok. He'd be in jail. He'd never get out of jail, hopefully, because, you know, mass shootings and all. And you know what the kicker is, guys? His parents were right at the end of the day. He should not have guns, and now he can't have guns, probably ever, legally. And that's if the country does a fucking background check, or whatever place he'd want to buy them from. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, I'm just kind of ranting now, but that's kind of it with the Blaec Lammers and Petty Fee saga. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.